So we're going to talk about user testing, and we'll also create our user testing form. So just to briefly go over user testing first. Basically, throughout the semester, we've been talking about the various considerations and techniques and approaches to game design and creating game mechanics. And so now we want to get user feedback on the games, because obviously, as we've talked about throughout the semester, games are an interactive medium. And so we can't really finish a game the way you might be able to make a drawing or a painting or an animation or something like that without getting good user feedback, because we need to know that the game is playable, that it makes sense, that the player is able to understand what's happening in the game. And so we really need to get user feedback throughout the process of a game, rather than creating the whole game and then giving it to people and finding out that they don't understand what's going on, or there's other issues with the game. So user feedback is a very important aspect of what we want to do in our game design process. And so we want to use good questions as well. So we don't want to just ask, what do you think of the game? We need to ask specific questions having to do with our game, and also look for try to kind of target what our goals for the game is. So if you have a game that has a lot of narrative and storytelling, you're going to want to ask about those features. If you have a game that's more action oriented, of course you're going to want to focus on that aspect of the game. So when we're doing user testing, we're kind of looking at different things, and we need to kind of understand the difference between those things. So one is bugs. Sometimes our game just doesn't work, or aspects of the game don't work the way that we want them to. So this is when something is happening that we did not intend to happen. And that's part of user testing, is somebody can say, I ran it on the Mac and it didn't work, or it didn't work on Windows, or, it did this weird glitch, or the buttons don't work. That's bugs. That's when something is happening that we didn't want to happen. The other aspect of it is things that we did create intentionally, but are not working, as far as the user experience goes. So that's more of a playability issue. So we have to kind of look for both of those things. Another thing to look for, actually, let's start creating our forms so we can add these as we go. So to create our user testing form, really there's a lot of different ways that you can get feedback from people. But a simple one that we can do pretty easily is just using a Google form. I assume that most of you guys have a Google account. You probably use Gmail. If you don't, it's obviously very easy to sign up for one. But I'm just going to use a Google form and create a very simple survey that I can give to people along with my game build. So I'm going to open a new tab, and I'm going to go to forms.google.com. And I'm already signed into my account that I use for BMCC stuff, which is this account here. And so if you have a Google account, if you have a personal account, feel free to use that. If you want to create a new account just for class, that's fine. Whatever you want to do is fine. And I'm just going to start a new form here. So I'm just going to create a blank form. And that's going to bring me to this form editing interface. And so I'm just going to name the form. So I'll say user testing, and then I'll give a little description. Please play my game and give me feedback. And I might include a link to the game here so that it's easy if somehow the person got to the form without being on the game page first. That's not super likely, but just in case, I'll include a link to the game. So I'm going to go to my itch page where I published my game on Tuesday, and I'm going to go to my user page and just click on my game that I published, and I'll copy this link and include that right here. And so people can go to the game if they need to, and I can actually add a link here. So I'm just going to link to the actual thing just to make it an interactive link. And then if I click on this title here, it'll fill that in as user testing. And so the first thing that we want to ask about is, are there any bugs? Maybe not necessarily the first thing, but we want to ask, if that's one thing that we might want to look for. So we can start to ask, different questions within the Google form. And of course, there's different options. There's quantitative feedback where we can give people like a range of options. There's qualitative feedback where we can give people like a text input to ask specific questions. So we can start with just a basic question. Did you encounter any bugs? And so we might want to add a description here, like if the game didn't run or something like that. And we can make this a short answer or a paragraph, whatever makes sense for this particular question. So we can, let's actually make this a multiple choice, and we'll say yes, and we'll say no, and then we can add a follow-up question. We can also set whether the questions are required, so this will make it so that the user has to answer the question in order to submit the form. So then let's add a new question, and we can say, if so, please describe the bugs you encountered. And we can make this a paragraph text, and this one won't be required because they may not have encountered any bugs. But we could also give options for what type of bugs. So we could put some more options here. We could say, can I move these around? Okay, let me X out of this one first. Okay, so did you encounter any bugs? We could have some options like the game would not start. And we could say, oh, I don't want other. I want option. So we could also say the controls did not work correctly. We could say I couldn't finish the game, whatever it is that we want to test for. And then we can have an option, I did not encounter any bugs. So that way we can get a little bit of specific feedback, and then if they did encounter a bug, we can get more feedback there. So that's the first one that we want to test for. But then we also want to test for playability. So we want to say, was it clear how to play the game? Was it clear what buttons to use and stuff like that? So we can follow up with our next question. Whoops. Let's move this down. Okay. We can say, was the game playable? Or maybe we want to be more specific. We can say, how was... how would I phrase this? Were the game controls clear? And then this is kind of this could be a yes or no question, or it could be like a text feedback. I'm gonna just do a short answer for this one and make this required. Okay. So another thing that we want to test for, and this is actually kind of related, is onboarding or guidance. Did the player understand what they were supposed to do and how to play the game? This one, we haven't gone over adding menus and stuff like that. We are going to go over that in later classes. So we don't really have a tutorial or anything like that in our game yet. So this might be something that would be better to get feedback on later. But this is the kind of thing that we would normally want to give feedback on. So we can, add another question here and say, was the goal of the game clear? And we could make this a short answer, make this required. So you don't have to do all of these questions. I'm just kind of giving different examples. You can focus on which questions you want to ask or which questions may be specific to your game. But onboarding and guidance, making sure that the player understands what they're supposed to be doing and how the game works, is an important part of the process. Another thing we can ask about is the play time. And this is going to vary depending on the game. Our games are going to be pretty short. So if somebody played for 2 to 5 minutes, that's probably good. If they played for like 0 minutes or less than a minute, that's probably not great. If they played for like 20 minutes, that probably might not make a lot of sense. So we can ask about the play time. We could say, how long did you play the game for? And this one could be a good multiple choice. We could say less than 1 minute, 2 to 5 minutes, and then greater than 5 minutes. Depending on what you think the play time would be, you can ask a range, and then if it aligns with what you think it should be, then that's good feedback. If it doesn't align, then that's something that you want to take into consideration. So I'll make that required as well. So a couple things to think about when we're asking questions in our user testing forum and also reading the user responses. We want to make sure that we're not bringing any assumptions to how we're reading the feedback. So something that's really common, especially if you have not made a game before, if you haven't gotten this type of user feedback before, you may, sometimes it can feel like you had an idea for a game that you think is good and it's not aligned with the kind of feedback that you're getting. And so that may be kind of hard to, it may feel like your user doesn't really understand what you're going for, or they might not be good at gaming and they don't really get it. And so what we want to do is try to view the feedback with a neutral point of view and just assume that the person who's giving us feedback, we don't want to assume that they're good at gaming, they're bad at gaming, that they've played a lot of games. We just want to take their feedback and try to understand what their experience is. So you might have a game that is intended to be really hard. You might be going for an audience that's more of a, serious gaming audience. And so what we really want to do is see if our goals for the game align with what our users are telling us. So we don't always have to, there's different ways that we might interpret the feedback. So a couple different types of feedback. As I mentioned, we have quantitative feedback. This is anything that uses like a scale. So we might ask the user to rate the difficulty. This could be another good question to add with a quantitative scale. So we could say, how difficult was the game? And we could use a linear scale. See, Google is already basically trying to guess what I'm going to say. And so we could say 1 is very easy and 5 is very difficult. And so they can rate the game based on that scale. And then we can, again, see if that aligns with our goals for the game. So you might want the game to be easy. You might want to be difficult. Probably you want it to be somewhere in the middle. So we just want to see what people say and then see if that goes with what we think. Qualitative feedback is more kind of descriptive, general feedback. You might ask questions specifically about what did you think of the style of the art, or the length of the game, things like that you might ask the player to kind of reflect on more. So depending on, again, what type of experience you're going for or what type of game you're going for, you might ask different questions here. So I'm going to ask a couple of qualitative questions. I'm going to say, what did you think of the art style? This will just give the player a chance to kind of, give their qualitative feedback. So I'll do a short answer for that one. And then you might want to have like a catch-all question, anything else that you want to talk about, to give the user a chance to, talk about any other feelings or experiences they might have had with the game. So I'll just say, any other thoughts on the game? You can really, there's different ways to ask this, but we'll use that as a paragraph. And I guess I won't make this required because they might not have any thoughts. So then we want to frame the questions. We want to think about how the user is going to interpret this question. So instead of saying what was your favorite level, which implies that, there was a favorite, we could say which level did you like the most, which kind of puts the user the framing puts the user in terms of thinking what they enjoyed versus, what was their favorite. We can get both specific and ambiguous questions to get different types of feedback. We don't want to get the user to basically create a new game for us. We want to be talking about the game that we created. And so we want to get feedback in terms of what was enjoyable about the game, what was frustrating about the game, but we don't really want feedback in terms of you should just do a completely different game. So framing our questions can kind of help with that. Okay, so let's see how many questions I have so far. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's actually a pretty decent number of questions. We probably want something between 5 and 10 questions, so it doesn't take too long to fill out, but we get some good feedback. We can preview our user testing form using the preview button. And so you can take a look at what it's going to look like when the user fills it out. So I can, try adding in some answers. I'm not going to do full answers because I just want to go through. So I'll just do a few sample answers and then submit, and we'll see what that looks like. We can see the response on this side, so you'll see that Google is going to give you, it's going to show you, for questions that have multiple options, it's going to kind of show you a graph of what that looked like. For questions that just have text responses, you're just going to see those text responses. So this will give you some things to reflect on. And so the first part of it is obviously creating the form and sending it out to people, collecting feedback. The next part of the assignment is to write a blog post reflecting on that feedback. So I'll talk about that in just a second. Once we're done with the form and we're happy with what it looks like, we want to attach it to the itch page so that when we send it to people, they can have a link to that form right there. So if I click the send button here and I go to the link section, there's going to be a URL right here. I can just copy this, and then I'll go back to my itch page, and I'll go to edit, and then I'll just find the details and say, please fill out my user testing form, and I'll link to that. You could also, maybe it'll look better if I just embed the link. So I'll select this text and click the link button and insert that link here and click open a new tab. There we go. I'll just save this. And so now if I send somebody this URL for the itch page, it will also have the user testing form built into it. And so once you get a certain amount of feedback, maybe 5 to 10 responses, we can go and write a blog post and just summarize a few things that you learned from the feedback. So once you get enough responses, we would go to the blog and I'd make a new post. And so I might call this user feedback. And I haven't actually gotten feedback yet, so you'll have to wait until you get some feedback, but I would say something like, based on the user feedback, I want to, and then you can talk about a few things that you would want to do to improve the game. So I'll say I want to improve my game by, maybe I'll add like a list here. Type in a list, and I'll say, fix the player collision box. If I get some feedback that says, the player collision box doesn't work exactly correctly, update some animations that are unclear, whatever it is that you get from the user feedback, you can talk about what you want to update in the game. You can also include stuff from the actual form. So for example, if I look at my responses to the form, you can actually like copy these images, or you can just screenshot them. It might be easier, honestly, just to screenshot them, but you can copy the image and then paste it into a clipboard. But I could also just, use a screenshot, so I can hit Command-Shift-4 and then just screenshot this section. And then I can put that directly into my user feedback. So I could go to my desktop where the screenshot is and throw in an image like that. So if there's certain parts of the feedback that you want to show related to what you're talking about in your blog post, you can add screenshots or, just copy and paste in there. Okay, so once you've done all that, we're ready to post our user feedback response. So I'm gonna go to, let's add a category called user testing. And then we'll publish. Okay, so that's basically the whole process for user testing. There's obviously a few different steps. You'll have to create the form, wait for people to get responses, and then write about those responses and write about what you want to do to kind of react to that feedback. We may not be able to do all of that this week, but we'll try to do that over the next few classes. Let's see, did we do everything? Okay, yeah, so I'll stop here, and then we can, if you guys have any questions, we can go over it.